The Final Fantasy series is known for having generally large casts of diverse and interesting characters. However, when it comes to fighting, often most of these characters are neglected and left on the sideline. Today on Critique Hit, we will discuss how Final Fantasy X makes all its characters valuable on the battlefield. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Critique Hit, here on the Game Age channel. I'm your host KDOS, and today we'll be talking about Final Fantasy X. Yes! It feels great to be talking about this game. We'll start with some quick information on Final Fantasy X. It's a JRPG created by Square, now known as Square Enix, and originally released on the PlayStation 2. As in a typical JRPG, this game involves a party of an ensemble of various different characters, and the way the game incorporates them into the battles can allow us to better appreciate each individual character in a way that isn't seen in many JRPGs. So for today, we'll be discussing two main points in Final Fantasy X and what I consider smart ways the developers handled these characters. In particular, we'll discuss the ways characters have a very defined role during battles, as well as when and how characters are recruited into the party. First, we will discuss how the designers have interwoven the characters, the enemies, and the battle system to create a game designed to give each character a reason to exist in terms of gameplay. This will require us to discuss the battle system itself. We aren't going to fully extrapolate on the granules of the battle system, but we'll be discussing what is relevant of the system as needed for this discussion. So Final Fantasy X's battle system is fairly different than the others in the series. Most other Final Fantasy titles up to this point used the turn-based system, or the active time battle system, to determine when characters could act. Instead, Final Fantasy X uses the conditional turn-based system, also known as the count-based system. So the system has characters perform in turns, but certain actions, such as stronger spells, may require longer time before the character may act again, and spells like haste and slow will also affect the turn in which characters may act. A real key to this though, I wish to discuss, is the ability to swap characters in and out of the active battle party. This does not use up the turn itself, allowing the character to act immediately. We'll come back to this later, but remember it for now. So as players, one thing we tend to want to be is efficient. When I talk about efficiency, I mean in regards in finding the easiest, quickest, or method requiring the least amount of effort to achieve our goals. Note, this can be subjective from player to player. See, a major difference between Final Fantasy X and most other Final Fantasy titles, or even JRPGs in general, is that in Final Fantasy X, each character has a very specific role. Wakka is great at taking out flying enemies. Lulu's magic can make quick work of elemental enemies. Tidus, with his balance of power and speed, is great for dispatching these dingo creatures. Auron, with his hard hits, can penetrate tougher shield enemies, and Riku can instantly eliminate most minor mechanical enemies. Yuna is regulated to be the healer, which is a specific role in itself, but can also summon various Aeons, which are useful for taking on hard enemies or for various tactical purposes. An exception is Kimahri, who doesn't have a defined role when compared to the others, but can be malleable to become a secondary option for most characters, or to focus and strengthen one key area. So what does this all mean? Well, this means each character has, except perhaps Kimahri, a very defined role, which is built into the battle system and monster design. As mentioned earlier, the player can switch out characters on their turn to bring in another character, which is more suitable to the task at hand. And this doesn't even cost a turn. Therefore, it makes the most sense to bring in characters most efficient to defeat the current enemies. Comparing this to other Final Fantasy titles, in most JRPGs, or RPGs in general, most characters don't have a role as defined as this. Now yes, the Final Fantasy titles have had the job system, or characters were a specific class, but often these were just alternative ways of doing damage, with occasional situational advantages. For example, a warrior, a dragoon, and a monk all have different stats, abilities, and equipable weapons, but when it comes to the battle system, they all sort of fill the same role of dealing damage, and this is usually unbiased based on enemy type. The white mage and other healer classes have a predefined role, and the black mage would be useful in defeating particular bosses and enemies. However, outside of this, the player chooses a party of available characters chosen based on a combination of their playstyle and sometimes relevant to the enemies they are facing. This usually means that the most efficient way of playing most Final Fantasy titles is to have only your best characters being those that will participate in battle, and secondary characters being the tag-alongs, at least in terms of gameplay experience. As this is usually the most efficient way to play these games, after all, the ones you use the most should get the most XP, ergo the most levels, and the purchasing of skills and equipment would more favourably favour those characters. Also, Final Fantasy VII and 8 in particular had it so the characters were particularly homogeneous when it came to the battle system, the only difference being some minor stats, equipable weapons, and the limit breaks. Outside of this, it didn't really matter which characters you used during the fights. You would usually pick the main character and your two other favourites, which would mean a large cast of characters would be neglected. Final Fantasy X avoids this by having the versatility to swap characters with ease during battles. And throughout the journey in Final Fantasy X, the player will encounter these same types of enemies, meaning that the characters remain relevant to their role, well, at least until you reach the point where you are able to finish the storyline. If we go back to efficiency, the system in Final Fantasy X does really well in this regard, with allowing for diverse character usage. Taking the first point, easiest, it is best in most cases, easiest, to match up the character to the right enemy type, which will result in quicker battles and less damage sustained. The time it takes to swap out and swap in a new character is very minimal, plus it does not use the character's turn, so there is no loss of turn. And as mentioned before, pairing up the right character will typically ensure the battle is over the quickest. And lastly, when it comes to effort, it does not require much effort at all, and is therefore highly viable. This all contributes to swapping characters in most cases to be the most efficient way in handling these battles. Now yes, this design in Final Fantasy X isn't exactly deep in this regard, of pairing up the best character against the current enemy, but what it does is a really good job of making each character have a purpose when it comes to the battles. In this regard, no character, except possibly Kimahri, feel as if they are dead weight, and so we don't feel as if any of these characters are useless. This allows us to better connect with each character, as each character has value when it comes to battling, meaning we can connect with them through both the narrative, but also with them on a functional level. This leads on to the next point, and that is the way the characters are recruited into the party. See, in most JRPGs, the characters form a group and pick up characters along the way. The issue with this is that the longer we play, the more likely we are into having a set battle party. This is because this party would be a basis of characters we like and /or the most efficient way to get through the game as mentioned earlier. This means as characters are met and join later on, we tend to neglect them, as we both have less narrative experience invested with them, but they may also form a disruption to our currently well-oiled, efficient party. These new characters may be underleveled, lacking abilities, need better equipment, or we may not know how they can best be utilised well into our current battle party. In short, to let them join the battle party, it means it will most likely become less efficient, as we suffer growing pains as we learn how this new mix can best operate. Final Fantasy X, on the other hand, has most of the party formed during the events at Besaid, where it consists of Tidus, Yuna, Wakka, Lulu, and Kimahri. But here is the really clever thing Final Fantasy X did. With the two extra characters who join later, Auron and Riku, we already have some experience playing with them. Auron during the events at the start of the game in Zanarkand, and Riku during the underwater events. Therefore, when we meet these characters again later, we already know what to expect and we already have a pre-established connection with them, better easing us into the transition. Plus, as mentioned earlier, with the battle system, it means these new characters will have immediate relevancy, such as when you recruit Auron at Miaihen High Road, you start finding the enemies he's designed to be strong against, and the same with Riku later on, meaning it's very viable to use them in your constantly changing battle party. Anyway, those were just two neat little design elements from Final Fantasy X I thought helped to better appreciate the characters and to avoid some potential pitfalls with static battle parties found in most JRPGs. Now, I'm not saying this is the ideal way that all JRPGs or RPGs should do it, but I felt in Final Fantasy X they worked very well in meeting the goals of the game designers, to make each character seem different but important. As always, please share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching this episode of Critique Hit. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see upcoming episodes on Suikoden, Tales of Xillia, and Legend of Dragoon, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out. Go on, join the Game Mage Battle Party. I really do like getting back into these JRPGs. Also, if you haven't yet, maybe check out some of our other shows on the channel. Once more, thank you, and have a great day. This is Kados, logging out.